Hello there, and welcome to the fifth episode of the Hiroto podcast series. And this episode is about the Singapore of Africa. And so this podcast is really just where I take some time to discuss different topics across Africa. This happens to be the topic of today. It is the third day after a long weekend, and so we did a little bit of research. And this topic was actually inspired by my cousin, which we will go a little bit deeper into that later. And so let's dive a little bit deeper into why um, Well, let's talk a little bit about why there's a place in Africa called the Singapore of Africa, right? And as we all know, Singapore is actually a dominating and leading economic country in Southeast Asia. It has recently had a great boost in tourism, and it's just a really good exporter of all sorts of goods and all that. So let's get into it. The country that is called the Singapore of Africa is Rwanda. And Rwanda has really taken efforts to become a leading African nation, just like Singapore becoming a dominating global economic center. And so it's really experienced a lot of economic growth with an emphasis on sectors like technology and tourism, like Singapore, and finance, which was really mirrors Singapore's rise as a business hub. And so Kigali, which is Rwanda's capital, is increasingly becoming a regional center for business and innovation. And this is what this slide is about, which is anti corruption policies and efficient government operations. And so you'll notice a trend across Africa is the people who are, some of them are dissatisfied with their government, saying that, the governments are not helping the people. We don't get enough representation in government. Well, the one of the main causes behind Rwanda's success is this sort of efficient government system where corruption is not really is a focus of the government. They're making sure that corruption is not happening. Meanwhile, in other nations, there's unfortunately corruption in the government that's happening where the money's not going where it's supposed to. It's not going towards the people. And so this, luckily, for the Rwandan people, is not a big problem. As you could see, there are very strong anti-corruption policies in Rwanda. The slogan is "There is no space for corruption in Rwanda." And so let's take a little bit to talk about these anti-corruption ideas. And so one of them is obviously, if the slides are not cooperating, one second. Okay, there we go. Government officials and public servants do face severe consequences for engaging in corrupt practices, including dismissal, fines, and prosecution. Very much like Singapore. And we're noticing a trend here, which seems to be that strict enforcement does lead to better economic practices, better practices based on like people, because it is less likely that people are going to commit corrupt practices if the punishments for them are going to be so strict, right? And so these policies do make sense. And leading by example is another version of this, where top government officials, including Kagame, who is the president of Rwanda, himself are expected to adhere to high ethical standards. And so he leads by example, showing the Rwandan people what is the right way, which I feel like that's actually a really good idea. And Kagame has really taken efforts to reduce corruption in the country, boost its economic and tourism. So I feel like that's really another part of the success story in terms of Rwanda. And this is also similar to how Singapore, under the leadership of Lee Kuan Yew, they really became a leading nation because of the strict policies in the government, and they were basically able to improve the country through the people, if you understand. And although Kagame has, typically, not typically, occasionally been accused of being kind of like a dictatorial leader, we're seeing the effects. It depends on who's the leader. I mean, we're seeing the effects of a good leader, even if he's, imposing strict laws on the people. We're seeing the effects of that here in Rwanda. And so, as we'll see later, the city has, Kigali in particular, has seen a lot of development. But first, we're going to talk about the different these slideshows. Okay, there we go. We're going to talk about the different organizations set up by the government that are aimed at improving the nation. And so the first one is the Office of the Ombudsman, and this was established to investigate and prosecute corruption cases across the country. and promote transparency, and moderate asset declarations of public officials. And so any citizen in the country can report corruption anonymously, enhancing public participation, which is a really, really smart setup. The second one is the Rwanda Investigation Bureau, which is the RIB, and which is a specialized agency responsible for investigating corruption and financial crimes. So they all have similar goals. As you can see on this top left image, Rwanda has a strong police and military presence. You can see in the last slide as well. Rwanda has a strong military presence. And the third one is the Rwanda Public Procurement Authority, which ensures fair, transparent, and competitive public procurement processes, reducing opportunities for bribery, and favoritism. And so these are all kind of like organizations that were set in place to achieve this one goal. And as you can see, corruption in Rwanda is actually really low. And so now, moving on, let's talk about Kigali, which is the capital of Rwanda, the capital city. Sorry. Okay, there we go. And so before I mentioned that the inspiration of this video was actually my cousin. So my cousin was actually just in Rwanda. He met with, he was on a trip because he studies at Cornell University. He takes a class, and they met with the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Department of Environmental Science or something. Uh, he basically met with the Rwandan government. An interview with him will be coming soon on this channel, so stay tuned for that. And he was actually the one who told me about this nickname of the country, which was, the Singapore of Africa. And looking at these images, you can really get an idea of why that is. This building right over here that I'm pointing to, this is the Kigali City Tower. This is the tallest building in Rwanda. It was recently built with a lot of glass. The infrastructure of Rwanda has really improved in the last few years. And, this is just the Kigali Convention Center. This is where many of the government conventions are held. So the infrastructure in Kigali is really nice. Kigali is also known for its cleanliness and organized urban planning and smart city initiatives. So the way the city is laid out is also very smart, which is very similar to Singapore's efficient and modern infrastructure. Rwanda has invested heavily in digital infrastructure with initiatives such as smart classrooms, cashless payments, and the promotion of ICT in education and businesses. And like Singapore, Rwanda prioritizes security and social stability, making it attractive for investors and tourism. And actually, a fun fact, Rwandan citizens actually dress quite nicely. So if you plan on visiting Rwanda, consider bringing mostly jeans and collared shirts. You're not allowed to wear shorts in Rwanda, as far as I know. So yeah, just keep that in mind if you plan on going to Rwanda. This picture does show a bus in Rwanda, and this picture on the right shows like bus routes across the country. And the public transportation in Rwanda is really good. And these routes travel across the country. You could see this red line traveling along Lake Kivu. And another thing about Lake Kivu, actually, which Lake Kivu, which is drained by the Ruzizi River, actually contains a lot of methane gas stores, which means that it can generate electricity for millions of people in Kigali. So yeah, that's a fun fact about Lake Kivu to the west of Rwanda right here. And so yes, Rwanda is a very good country, but despite these progressions that Rwanda has made, it still suffers from challenges such as limited natural resources and regional political dynamics and economic dependence on foreign aid, like many other African countries. However, it does include the strategic vision known as Vision 2050, which aims to position Rwanda as a middle to high income economy by leveraging knowledge-based industries and innovation. And so this picture shows like the future. This shows like the urban design of Rwanda. So on these hills, Rwanda is known for its urban design, and so this is kind of like a plan of that. And then this is just like a pamphlet of Vision 2050 in Rwanda. And so that is where we are ending for our 5th episode of the Hiroto Around Africa podcast series. I hope that was interesting, and I will see you in the next video. Stay tuned for that interview. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.